everybody. We are finally here. We've been talking about it for a few months, and it's a big day. It is the day for the first episode of the TypeAlias Show Livestream. So thanks for being here. I'm so happy to have you with us here. We're going to be talking about kotlinx.rpc today. We're going to actually take a project that's using Ktor with REST, and we're going to try to convert that to kotlinx.rpc. I'll be answering some of your questions later on. And also, before we get too far, I've got to announce that behind the scenes with me today, I have my lovely producer and wife, Elizabeth. Thank you for being here, Elizabeth. We'll give her a round of applause there. And let's also take a look at, before we get too far, let's get the poll up for Kotlin 2.0, because I really want to hear from you guys about how the Kotlin 2.0 adoption is going. I know some people have been able to jump to it already. Some people, for different reasons, have needed to stay behind. So let me know what is going on there for Kotlin 2. Oh, thank you so much, guys. Man, we got lots of comments coming in already. I really appreciate this guy. Let's see. So yes, speaking of chat here, this is a live stream, and one of the things I'm super hyped about here is that normally when I post a video, we can only interact just kind of a little bit, but one of the big cool things about doing a live stream, of course, is the fact that we get to interact more. And so definitely keep the chats coming in, say hello to me, say hello to other people, and we will, even if you got questions as I'm going through things, let me know what the questions are. I might or might not be able to answer them, but send them out anyway, and we'll see what I can do. And of course, if somebody asks a question and you have the answer to it, feel free to chime in on chat with the answer as well. Okay, great. So we got a few fun things happening in the Kotlin community. You might already have heard about this, but we do have all of the KotlinConf videos are now up according to the Kotlin team. So a couple different ways you can get to them. They're on YouTube, but I've noticed that I don't think there's actually a playlist for KotlinConf 24. I think there's a playlist for the conversations, the shorter segments with different people. But for the actual talks, I found the best way to get to the talks is here on the KotlinConf page. So kotlinconf.com/talks, and maybe we can pin that in chat if we haven't done that yet. And you can see we've got the all of the talks are just kind of in order of when they appeared at the actual event. So that's a great way to catch up on them. I would also love to hear from you guys. I have got quite a few of these videos I got to catch up on myself. And so let me know if there was a session that you thought was especially great, that you really enjoyed and you think is going to be worth everybody taking a watch. Let me know. I would love to be able to catch up on the ones that, especially the ones that you guys found to be especially helpful. So. We also have the release of Ktor 3.0 beta. So let's take a look at some of the features here. One of the big ones is migrating to the kotlinx.io library. And this one's pretty funny. I actually pulled up the pull request for it. And this has got like, I think 5,000 lines added and somewhere around like 37,000 lines removed. So there's a lot of code that was there for the kind of like the IO layer of stuff in Ktor that just got to be completely removed and just kind of delegating to kotlinx.io for that. So that's pretty cool. Probably the biggest piece that I'm excited about for Ktor 3 is this guy right here. This is the Ktor client for Kotlin WebAssembly. So I haven't done a whole lot with WebAssembly myself yet, but having that client available on all platforms is like majorly important because Ktor is kind of the multi-platform library for networking stuff for Kotlin. So having that available and being able to standardize on everything across all of our different targets, including WebAssembly, I think is really cool. So I'm looking forward to that. There's also this one here, the CSRF protection feature for cross-request site forgery. Did I get that right? Cross-site request forgery. There we go. And yeah, so this is one of those situations where if you've got a website, maybe you're running a bank and somebody else creates a form that can post to your bank's website where maybe it does a withdrawal to some particular account. If you don't authorize, if you don't make sure that that request actually came from your servers, if that form wasn't submitted from your servers, you could end up where people are kind of like hacking that way. So there are a number of mitigations for it, and I think there might have even been some third-party plugins for Ktor already, but having first-party support for CSurf is a pretty cool idea. So lots of cool stuff going on there. So speaking of Ktor, our project today is using Ktor. We're going to be looking at kotlinx.rpc. So let me pull up what we've got here for RPC fun. And let's just talk about kotlinx.rpc for a moment. It's a pretty recently released library. I think May was the first public launch. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I think that's when it was. Definitely still experimental. So we're going to experiment with it a little bit today. And the idea behind RPC, remote procedure calls, is that we can take calls that are going to cross network boundaries and call them as if they were just function calls, part of the same code base. So instead of calling REST with an HTTP client, you would just, it would look just like you're calling a regular function in your same local code base. So for today, here I've got a client-server project that is using REST with Ktor. And like I said before, we're going to see what we can do to convert this thing to RPC. So let's take a quick tour of just what this app looks like. This is a very simple notes app that I made. We just got a list of notes here on the left-hand side, and we can click into them and edit them. So we can change the title here to List of Reminders. And we can add stuff to the main content down here as well. And this is saving so that we can keep coming back to them and it'll persist the information. So let's take a look at the code for this as well. I'm going to move this aside here and get this out of the way. We've got two main layers to this thing. We've got a service and we've got a desktop app. So this is using Compose multi-platform for the desktop app. And the service is, like I said before, built with Ktor. So let's take a look at the front end part of this thing here. By the way, in multi-platform apps, I find a lot of times it's kind of easy to get a little bit lost when you've got all the different modules on the left-hand side. So you've got your, your Compose app, your server here, your shared, and then you've got common in some of those. And so it's easy to just get a little confused with where you are with things. So what I did for today was I highlighted these with I guess like a source scope. There we go. Yep, I used a scope to create different colors here. So whenever you see this blue background, either on this left-hand side or on the tab here, it's part of the front-end code. And the server I did in red, and the shared code I did in purple. So hopefully that'll kind of help just as you're looking at the tabs or you're looking at the left-hand side there, just to help kind of keep things straight. Okay, so let's look at what this source code looks like. Actually, let's start with the shared code because that's where we've got our core models. And I've got two different kinds of note models here. The first one is just called a note stub. And that's what I'm using to refer to this, the list here on the left-hand side. So even though this is a very simple app, I wanted to at least make it a little bit more, give it a little bit of real life aspects to it. So the note stub that you see here pertains to this list. So the models that are used in this part of the app here. And then the only difference between note stub and note that you see down here is this contents. And the contents is that text box right there. And so we're really only going to load that full object model whenever we've picked one of the items out of the list to load. So it's kind of like if you had, a model that's going to be maybe a little bit longer to download. It might not be a good idea to download all of it just with the list. You want to just wait until you actually need it before you download. So that's the idea there. Okay, so that's why we've got the note stub and the note, the full note model. So the full note model is used over there on the form. Okay, let's take a look next at the server side. This is, like I said before, just a Ktor service using REST with JSON. So we've got content negotiation here for JSON. We've got really just 3 endpoints. We've got one for listing the notes. So this is for getting a list of notes. And then we've got this one for getting an individual note. And that's the one that returns the full model with the contents. And then we've got this one for updating updating a single note. And that's all we got. I did not add any way to create a new note. I didn't make any way to delete a note. We could do that. It wouldn't be very hard, but it just wasn't going to add very much to the example. So I figured I'd just kind of keep it thin. Let's look behind this REST layer here and go into the actual service that is doing the heavy lifting for this thing. I say heavy lifting, but we've only got like one line for a couple of these guys. So you can see down here, I'm even bypassing, like, there's no database. We're just keeping a mutable list in memory. But the idea is we're going to exercise kind of the main flow of how this data would go. We don't need to concern ourselves with all the extra little intricacies of setting up databases and that kind of thing. So it's just here in this list, but it can be modified. And then we'll take a quick look at the front end as well. If you are familiar with, if you do Android development already, the front end is going to be very familiar to you because it's going to use that same composable view model and data layer that you're already familiar with. So in the very front, we have the app window, and that's just going to start this is the entry point for the entire UI there. The note list is responsible for that left-hand side of lists of notes, and then the note form is the one that's got just a little bit more to it because we are managing the state of the form, whereas the list, we didn't have to manage any state. And then behind the composables are the view models. So we've got a view model for the list, and we've got another view model for the note form. And then behind that is where we've got our note repository, and this is the one that is going to interface with the REST service. And you see it's pretty thin, but it does just make those calls out to the same endpoints that we talked about in the service layer. All right, so with that, I think we're ready to see what we can do to convert this into using RPC. Let me see, did we have any other questions about the setup of the project here? We've got... Great. Okay. Yeah. So I think we're pretty good. I'm going to pull up this one here. We've got this one. Does kotlinx.rpc support gRPC? And the answer is that it does not yet, but according to the team, that is definitely on the radar. They're definitely working on that one. So that should be coming sometime soon. Any other questions on the app? Okay, I think we're good. So we'll just move on here. So the goal here is going to be that we're going to try to replace the REST API with kotlinx.rpc. And so by the time we're done, we should be able to eliminate anything having to do with REST, and everything should just work. So let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. We have one other question that popped in here. Let's see. Do you use Ktor client instead of retrofit? I do frequently use Ktor client instead of retrofit. It just depends on the some projects I use, like contracts that I'm working have retrofit, some have Ktor clients. Yeah, I tend to lean into just Ktor REST myself, but they're both fine solutions. But we'll see. Actually, the RPC is kind of like similar to retrofit in a way because it's kind of building out sort of the same layer just in a different way. Cool. Thanks for that, Paul. All right, so let's roll up our sleeves and get to work here. So the very first thing that we're going to do anytime that we're pulling in a new library, obviously, is what? We got to pull in the dependencies, right? So let's start with the build Gradle files. And I'm going to come in here and add, we've got a couple of dependencies we need to add for the implementation, but we also have some for the Gradle plugins. So this one here is the kotlinx.rpc platform, and this one's going to pull in a bill of materials that's just going to make it easier to get the version numbers that we need in the dependencies that we're going to get to down here. Let copy and paste these guys in rather than typing them by hand. So we've got, again, we're on the client side here. So we've got this library for the client. We've got the library for Ktor, because kotlinx.rpc can, theoretically, it will be able to run on top of different types of technology, different transports and everything. So here we're going to be using Ktor because I think that might be the only one that is supported at this point. So that's why we've got that one there. And then the serialization will be using JSON. So that's what we've got here. And let's go to server side, and we'll be doing similar thing here. We'll pull in the platform plugin up top. And we'll see that the dependencies that we load in here are actually pretty similar to the ones that we had for the client side. And let me add a few extra lines here so I can scroll a little bit farther and not hide it with my face on the screen. So we've got pretty much the same thing, except we've replaced client with server here and here as well. So we're still using serialization JSON, but we've got those two, server and Ktor server. And then things get a little bit more interesting when we go to the shared code, because this is where we're going to put some of our interfaces that will be that will generate code for. So we'll see that in just a minute. But to start with, we're going to need two different Gradle plugins here. So we've got Kotlin symbol processing, and we've got the main RPC.plugin, not platform, this is plugin, because this one's going to do some of the code generation for us. And you can see here, by looking at that, you're probably guessing that I am indeed using Kotlin 1.9 on this project. And the reason is, since this is using KSP, they're going to be changing to using the like the compiler plugins directly for the new front-end compiler in Kotlin 2. So Kotlin 2 will be not supported yet. We're still only supporting Kotlin. Kotlin 1.9 is still the only one that's supported by this library right now, but Kotlin 2.0 will be happening probably pretty soon, I'd imagine. Okay, so we've got those, and then we've got just to add the implementation for kotlinx.rpc core. And I'm hoping that all of this works. So I'm going to stop these two runs that we've got going on here, and I'm going to just re-import everything and let Gradle do its thing, let it reconfigure and make sure that we've got nothing broken. Okay, no errors right there, so that's a good sign. Okay, so like I said before, our objective is to, really the objective of RPC is to make it so that the network calls look like a regular Kotlin function call. And so for us, what that means is that everything between the view models on the client and the note service on the server is really just there to deal with REST and HTTP. And so if we didn't have those, like if we didn't have that layer to deal with at all, then the view model would really just want to call directly into the note service. Like ideally, that's all it would do. It's just that we have this code over elsewhere across the network. And so that's why we kind of need this layer to talk to it. So to demonstrate a little bit more of what I mean by that, let's pull up a couple files here. Let me close these out. And let's pull up the note repository and the note service here. And let's get these side by side. Move that over there. Okay. So if we look at the code here, we see the note repository. Remember, the view models are what's calling into this note repository. If we look at the interfaces for these two, we see they're actually really similar. Like we've got this list, we've got get, and we've got save, and we've got the exact same thing over here. And in fact, all of the types for return types and argument types, they're all the same. And so it kind of feels like there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of in between the view models and this note service, which seems to be really what that view model wants to get to. It's just that it has to go over all the network in order to get there. The only real difference in the interface between these two classes is that we've got the suspend suspend functions over here. And yep, there we go. Suspend. So if we can extract an interface that kind of like represents this note service, it would really do what the view model is looking for anyway. So let's start by creating an interface from this. So I'm going to come to the note service here. I'm going to right click it, and we're going to do, we've got a refactor, extract interface. We're going to do that. I'm going to extract it to a separate file. This is going to stay in the note service project, the module, but we'll move it here in a moment. We're going to turn on all 3 of those. We're going to hit refactor. And now we have this iNote service over here. And the only change I'm going to make to it is, since we saw that we've got these suspend modifiers over here, we're going to add them here as well. And I believe this is a requirement for and any functions that KotlinX.rpc is going to generate for us. I think they've got to be suspend. So now that we've got those in place, let's move this iNote service down to the shared code so that it'll be accessible both from the client and the server. All right, and when we do that, we do get an error over here, and that is because the iNote service, actually, we got one more thing that I forgot we got to do here. Let's add RPC here. That will extend an RPC interface. And we'll come back here. And we have, let's see here, iNote service. Yes, it does not implement coroutine context. And that's because this RPC is actually a coroutine scope. And if you might remember, coroutine scope basically just has a coroutine context in it. So we will see if we can just implement as constructor parameter. That should do. There we go. That's good. Now remember, we got to make these guys suspend functions. And that gets rid of the error there. Okay, that looks good. And let's now go to wire it up, because I think that should do it for the server side, and we've got this in the shared code. So let's go to the client side, and let's open up the HTTP configuration that I've got here. While we've been using the REST version of this, I've just had this default HTTP client. So I'm just going to put the same kind of a thing here, but we're going to create a separate client for the RPC. So we're going to say val RPC client, call the HTTP client factory, and we're going to install RPC like this. And let's see if we got a import for that guy there. Great. And then we're going to want the serialization. Remember, we pulled in the serialization JSON, so we'll set that up here. Say JSON, and what do we like the pretty print, right? So let's do that. And imports. Okay, that looks good. And now all we got to do to get this actually to create a note service for us based on that interface that we had, we're going to create a suspend function here. I'm just going to call it get notes. We'll call it get note service. Like that, and import that guy. And we're going to return, based on the RPC client that we've got above, we're going to do RPC like this, I believe. Let's see. Yep, and then we're going to say URL, and then this is going to be running over, eventually KotlinX.rpc is going to be able to use different types of mechanisms underneath it. For now, we're using we're going to be using WebSockets here with Ktor. So we're going to do WebSockets, and I'm going to set this to my local host 8080 and use the /rpc as the path for it. And then at the end of this, we're going to do .with service, and I'm going to call this iNote service. That, and let's get this guy imported. And all right, no compiler errors, so I think we're good on that. Okay, so we've wired up the client side. We haven't seen the magic happen yet, but we've wired up the client side. Let's step over to the server side and get that part wired up as well. So we're going to open up our Ktor application module here. And just like we can install any other plugins for it, we're going to install RPC like this. There we go. And then we just need to add the route. So you remember here, we've got this localhost /RPC. So we're going to add a route for that here. So we'll say RPC and then the path. And we'll do an RPC config here. We'll add our serialization. That and then we're going to register the service here. So that's the that is the interface that we had created. We're going to register a service for that, and we're going to get the note service here. And we're just going to pass the coroutine context. You remember we had to add that to that service. All right, and so we've wired it up on both the client side and the server side, and so we're pretty well ready to go. We just need to start using it. So let's go back to, oh, do we have an error here? We do have an error somewhere. What did I miss? Let's see. Coroutine context. Oh, yeah. This is the old version of it. We do actually have a coroutine context here anyway, so we'll just pass that in. We're eventually going to eliminate that anyway. Okay, let's see. Let's go to the view models here. And I'm going to take out, we had the note repository, but remember, note repository is really kind of there for the sake of making that HTTP call. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to be piping everything through the WebSockets. So we're going to take this out here, remove that entirely. But we've got to do something here. And so instead, I'm going to do get note service, which is the one that we had just created back here. Now, the reason that I'm not passing this in as a constructor parameter, like we were doing with the repository, is that this is a suspending function. And I believe the reason it's doing that is probably because it has to do the handshake for WebSockets here. So if we were building a larger app, we would probably do some kind of initialization phase for the app, let all these kinds of dependencies load up, and then still pass them in as constructor parameters. But for today, I'm just going to call directly to get the note service this way. So that does it for the list view model. Let's come over to the note view model for the form, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take off the constructor entirely. We've got two of these here, so I'm just going to do get note service. Again, this would be better if we were actually caching that service altogether, but that's okay. All right, and that might be it. Let me see here. Do we have anything else we got to do? That looks right. Let's test this out and see if we broke anything. So we'll start up the service first. Okay, and we will start the desktop app. All right, and it so far it was looking good. Let's see if we change things here, how we're doing. List of, that updates just fine. That, and so it looks like everything is working just fine. So that's pretty cool. So just to reassure ourselves that we actually are using what we just wrote, let's go in and eliminate all of the things that we were including just for the sake of rest. So let's entirely delete this note repository. And we can see it's not actually referenced anywhere, but we'll go ahead and delete it. And then back in the server layer, we really just need that RPC endpoint. We can delete these. And we have no need for these appear either. So that definitely slimmed up the definitions for Ktor here. And let's run it again. Let's fire it up, but I'm convinced. So let's take a look at, see if we've got any questions that are happening here. Yep, so this is still working. Yeah. All right, so that's a pretty quick demonstration of how kotlinx.rpc can be used to convert from a REST API just to using just the direct calls. And you can see back here in the view model, it's really just the same as if we were calling our repository, but instead of the repository, we're calling this note service. And then kotlinx.rpc does all of the magic code generation for us to be able to make it so that this actually ends up calling that note service over on the server side. All right, so we removed all the layers between the view models and the service class and the service layer. All that networking machinery has been replaced by kotlinx.rpc. We had a small amount of configuration on both the client side and server side, but really wasn't too bad. And in fact, on the server side, the configuration is actually less than what we had for REST, so that was pretty cool. Like I said, this is still hot out of the oven. This is a pretty recent project. It's definitely experimental, so not ready for prime time yet. But if you're anything like me, you probably have a couple of hobby projects sitting around that might be good candidates for trying this out on. I've definitely got some that are already, especially the ones already using WebSockets, that I think would be pretty cool to try to replace this with this. So the future of this thing, we'll see what the Kotlin team comes up with, but I'm hoping for some additional transport options, some extra features like retry, back pressure, all that kind of thing. But just as far as the experience goes here, this is actually, it's pretty lightweight and it feels pretty good. So let's see what kinds of questions we've got from you guys here. What are the general benefits of using RPC over REST? Are there any types of projects that benefit more from RPC than REST? So, so there are some benefits to the REST layer, at least insofar as we have control over things like caching. Scaling works different, right? So, but I guess it kind of depends on what you're using for the transport, because RPC is just kind of like a layer that makes it as if you can use your things locally. So I will say, like, you know, there is a difference in how scalability works for, say, WebSockets than for REST, right? You can kind of, because of the pull approach with REST, or pulling or polling, where you can kind of scale that out and it's not a problem. But with WebSockets, it's just a little different because you've got a reference to all the different clients that have open connections to you. So there's that. Yeah, trying to think if there's, you know, the caching layer is probably another thing. Anything that you need to do that where you want those semantics. I would say anything where you've got a public service that you want other people to adopt. You know, the REST API is such a great standard already and can be used by any, you know, anybody with any programming language can write a REST client that can talk to it. So, but probably for, you know, things that are more managed inside, you know, within your own organization, seems like it would also be a good candidate. But I'm open to it. I have not used RPC in production code bases myself, so I think that's about as far as I feel confident to speak on the trade-offs of it with REST. We can definitely see just from the code point of view that there's quite a bit less, you know, less code that we had to deal with when we've got RPC doing all the code generation for us. So, let's see, isn't ws:// required anywhere too? How does it know to use that when routing? Let me pull up my screen again here and see. So I believe that the way that's going to work is that this RPC, this special kind of route for RPC, is going to indicate that it's using WebSockets here. I think that's how that works. So that's why we didn't have to specify it here as part of that function call there. Let's see. We got one from Ivan here. Let me switch back. Oh, I see. This is actually directed toward Jesse Hill. All right, yeah, we got some people. I was a little worried we could start a little bit of conversation here with REST versus other approaches, but yeah, REST is, especially the hypermedia part of it, the Hadios part of it. I think it feels like it never quite caught on, like I think some people had kind of hoped it would. But REST is still, it's still pretty well entrenched in a lot of ways. So I don't know, Ivan, if you want to elaborate on almost no one is using REST. That it seems a little bit extreme to me, because I do think there are still like a lot of REST interfaces, especially for for some of the larger public APIs that are out there. So, but happy to hear some of those other points too. Is gRPC more secure than REST HTTP? I do not know the answer to that. Anybody in chat, if you've got answers to that, feel free to chime in. All right, and we've got this one asking about, can we look at the generated code? I have no idea. Let's see if it's, I assume it's going to be somewhere in the build folders. Let's see, I'm going to have to switch to, see if I can actually find where my build folders are here, because I think I might have hid them before. Tree parents. Excluded files, there we go. Let's try that. And actually, let's share my screen again here. See if we can find it. Generated, probably under KSP here. Compose. Yeah, I don't see it right off. If anybody knows where that generated code ends up, I wouldn't mind hearing it. So feel free to shout that out in the chat if you know. Yeah, what am I trying to build here? There's a lot of build stuff here going on. That's just in the client side. So, all right. Well, with that, I think we're pretty good on kotlinx.rpc. So let's tell you what, let's pull up the results of the poll and see what we got there. We had 44% on Kotlin 2. Okay, yeah, that is actually lower than I was expecting. 35% on Kotlin 1.9. So that's pretty close. That's a pretty close split between those two there, and a handful of people still on 1.8. And hey, I got to say, I'm happy that we've got 8% of the people watching this who are not actually Kotlin developers. I'm so glad you're here. I hope that you're enjoying getting to see some of the cool things that Kotlin can do. Well, that is great. Okay, we have a couple of questions that you all had submitted ahead of time, and so we're going to reach into the grab bag to get some of the Q&A going on for that one. This one comes from Franklin. Franklin was asking, what are variance annotations in and out in Kotlin, and when would you use them? So this is, the in and out modifiers are used for getting subtyping with generics. Let's take a look at the code that I've got here. I'm going to zoom this in actually just a little bit more because we don't need quite as much real estate. So normally when you are trying to get a subtype, you just simply extend a class. That's kind of the most frequent way to do this. So here I've got this container class, and we want to make bag a subtype of it, and so we just extend the container class using bag. And the benefit, one of the big benefits here is polymorphism, so you can use a bag anywhere that your code is expecting a container type. You can give it the bag like we're doing down here. So that works great when all you've got is just your regular classes. But once you are involving generics, things get a little bit different. So here I've got the same code essentially, but we've got a generic version of it where it can hold any kind of item. And we've got the same situation. So if all you want is the main class type, if you want a bag of tea to extend a container of tea, no problem at all. And you've still got your, this is a bag of string here. We don't have the type explicitly specified, but that's what it is. And then a container up here, and we can still pass it in. So it all works exactly the same if that's all you're looking for there. But once we are working with generics, it's not unusual for us to want to subtype not based on the classes themselves, but on the type arguments of the generics. So for example, here we've now got a container of this stock function is taking a container of fruit. And so we might want a container of fruit to be a supertype of a container of apple, for example. Or I guess I should say a container of apple to be a subtype of container of fruit. And so that's the kind of thing, like when you need that is when generic variance is going to help you out. Like that's what it's designed for. So normally we can do this. And in fact, let's even just come up here and do, this will be a little easier actually if we just use containers here instead. So let's change this here. Get rid of this guy for now. And then, so the benefit of doing this is if we say out here, then you notice that down here, this now compiles. So if I don't have out, that breaks down below. If I put it in, it works down there, but we then get this compiler error up here. And the reason for this is that when we use out, that's making a guarantee to the compiler that we're not going to put that type parameter in the out position. And the reason it's considered in the out position here is because we've got a var instead of a val. So it's read and write. So if we change it to a val, everything's good. So that's the idea behind generic variance, is that we can use it to get subtyping based on the type arguments of the of that class instead of on the class type itself. And variance is not like, it's not a complicated topic. It's just a little hard to grasp, I've noticed. So, it takes a little bit to get your head around it, but once you do, it's actually not hard. It's actually pretty simple and pretty easy to keep up with. But if you're still learning about generic variance and you still want to try to figure it out and you feel like you're having a little trouble with it, I would say check out chapter 19 of Kotlin, an Illustrated Guide. And that chapter is pretty long, but it covers this in kind of an easy to grasp way with examples throughout that kind of build on top of one another and hopefully make it easier for you to understand. And then on top of that, I've got a handful of videos that I did on YouTube not too long ago about variance that might also be helpful to you. So if you still feel like you're trying to grapple with some of those concepts, hopefully those are some good resources for you. And if you still have trouble, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk through anything that you'd have questions about. Okay, I think we've got another question here. Let's see. From our grab bag. Here we go. Tim, oh yes, Tim had asked me this on a Premiere video chat a while back, and I never got to him about it. So yeah, the question was, what's the purpose of the unsafe variance annotation? So unsafe variance is, so like we just discussed, when we add the inner out modifiers, Kotlin's going to restrict us from what we can do with it. So if we say it's an out modifier, we can't use it in an in position. If we say it's an in modifier, we can't use that type parameter in the out position. But we can use the unsafe variance annotation to work around this. And when would we want to do that? Well, let's take a look at what we got here. So here we've got another version of that same container class that we were just looking at. And when I uncomment this code, this is setting the item. The reason that Kotlin doesn't let us do this is that if we're using this polymorphically, or yeah, I guess polymorphically, like as like if we're dealing with a container of fruit and we pass in a container of apples, it's not going to be safe to always put the item back in because it might be a container of bananas. We don't know. So so Kotlin doesn't let us do that. But so in other words, storing the item back like this, changing the state back to this item would be not safe to do. But there are times where we might still want that generic type in the in position here. So for example, with this function contains, we're not actually going to take this other item and store it. We're not changing the state of this object. We're just pulling it in so that we can examine it and compare it. And so for that reason, it is actually safe as long as we don't store it as state. So if we come over here and we say unsafe variance, then you can see we get rid of the compiler error. So unsafe variance is kind of a way to bypass that restriction that doesn't allow us to set the state. Now, you're going to be using this at your own risk, right? So if you come in here, we say this item equals item, there's nothing protecting us from doing that. We might get a, oops, that is other. Let's try that. Yeah, there's nothing preventing us from doing that. So we'll end up with trouble at runtime. So use it with caution, but there are a handful of cases like this where you just, like we could have said here, for example, any, we could have said contains and made this type any instead of the type parameter, but like why do that if we know that this thing contains only type T? So that's the idea there, unsafe variance. All right, and I think we got one more question from the grab bag here. Guy is asking, what's a good way to practice Kotlin as a way to learn it? Do you recommend Android apps for that? So here's the thing. I would say if you're already an Android developer, then sure, get in there with Kotlin, build some Android apps, and you're going to have a lot of fun with it. You'll find the experience is quite delightful. But if you're not already an Android developer, there is a lot to Android development just in it on its own. Like there's so much to learn having to do with Android development alone, apart from Kotlin, that I think if you tried to bite off all of that, you're actually probably gonna feel a little overwhelmed with it. So I would recommend stay close to whatever you already do. Like if you're already a service developer, then try building some services with Kotlin. Especially if you're in the Java world, right? If you're building Spring services, just try changing some of them to use Kotlin instead. See how it changes the feel of the code and the way that you can express things. But stay close to what you already know so that you have less to bite off and you can focus mainly on the code itself. And if you have nothing that you're already close to, if you're not already a software developer and you want to learn the language, then I would say just kind of get in there and play with it a little bit here and there. I would love for you to take a look at the illustrated guide, Kotlin and illustrated guide. You can find that at my website, typealias.com/start, and you can read it there online. And the goal of that book, as I was writing it, was to be able to take somebody who really had, very little knowledge, or basically assume no particular knowledge, and ramp that person up to be a productive developer in Kotlin day to day. And so if you're already a programmer, it'll be all the easier for you to read through that book. But if you're new to programming in general, I hope that will also be helpful for you, because I try to make sure I don't use any crazy words until I've already defined them, so that you can really follow along as best as possible. All right, so I think that's going to do it for the questions in the grab bag for today. Now, I did get a couple other questions from you guys. And they're great questions. I might get to them in the next live stream just because of some of the focus of different things that I'm working on, and also because some of the questions were so good that I wanted to actually take time to develop better answers for you. So they're still in the grab bag, and we'll get back to them at some point. Now, I have also heard from a few of you just about, like I know some of you are having a little trouble with keeping up with things in the industry. All the technology changes all the time. Some of you have mentioned how, you feel like your peers are kind of getting ahead of you on different technology, and it's kind of hard to keep up with them. And then we got things like artificial intelligence. Who knows? Is AI going to come through and eat all of our jobs? Who knows? So I want to just talk about that for a minute. So my wife Elizabeth and I, we used to do a little more hiking than we do now. Probably about 5 years ago, we did a lot of hikes. And people who do through hiking on like the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail, some of those real long trails that take months to hike, they have a saying, and the saying is hike your own hike. And I feel like that applies to our careers also, because it's easy to look around and feel like you're just getting behind and that other people are, learning so much more than you are. But just hike your own hike. It's fine. Like, figure out what you want to be an expert on. Make a plan to become good at that. The world doesn't need everybody to have the same skill set. Actually, I think we need some variety. And so I think a team that has, good variety in what they know and what they've experienced and what they can build is very valuable. So don't get worked up about other people and what they're doing. It's great. Keep in mind and keep an eye out for what they're doing and certainly take an interest in it and get a good breadth of understanding of the different technologies that are out there and everything. But also don't get worked up about having to feel like you've got to be an expert at everything, because the technology industry is so massive, and these days there's so many different types of technology and so many different things that you could learn. It gets crazy, and there's no way you're going to learn it all. It's very overwhelming. So make a plan. So figure out what is it that you want to be an expert at. Make a plan for it. Figure out how you're going to become good at that. And then follow through on that plan. And if the plan needs to change later, that's fine, right? Like if that happens a lot. Like sometimes the technology choices at work might change. You might need to pivot. That's okay. But make a plan. Follow that. Don't just chase every new thing that comes along. Just decide what it is you want to do and hike your own hike. So that's what I've got for you today. Next week, we have a bonus video coming out for you. So typically we put videos out every other week, and today we're doing a live stream kind of in place of the usual video. But next week we're going to have a bonus video where I recently had a chance to do a lunch and learn talk at a local meetup. And so this one covers coroutines, and you will get to see this one next week because we recorded it just for you. So we're planning to have that ready for you on Wednesday. So keep an eye out for that. And the next live stream, I know some people have been asking about the next live stream, and I don't have an answer for you just yet because we're still trying to figure things out. We definitely want to get on a regular, just a regular release schedule for videos and a regular release schedule for the live streams as well. So we're going to settle down on something for it, but I don't know what it is just yet. So the best way to keep ahead of all that information is to sign up for my email newsletter, because I will let you know there when we've got something figured out for the live stream schedule. Let's take a quick look and just see if there were any other questions that I can get to. Paul says follow-up might show the streaming facility and include Kotlin. Yes, yeah. So I think some of the very cool stuff in RPC is actually around flow, but we didn't demonstrate that. There's not going to be a chapter 21 on flow. Chapter 20 is the last chapter for the illustrated guidebook, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to be writing about it and producing articles about it or creating videos about it. So yes, we'll have those coming in. And let's see, we got this one here, Emmanuel. How about a live stream once every 2 or 3 weeks? That sounds good to me. Yeah, I think probably every 2 weeks would be good. I just got to make sure we can keep up with that. I got to make sure I don't overcommit on things and that we ramp it up at a good pace. So that sounds good to me. We'll see what we can do. And SB says, are you going to be on Twitch, Patreon, Rumble, etc.? I'm starting off just on YouTube just because that's where we've already got, a lot of the people are keeping up with me there already. Twitch, I probably won't on Twitch. I know the streaming software that we're using can broadcast to multiple platforms, including like X and LinkedIn, and probably can do Twitch as well. I don't know. So we might be able to make that happen. Patreon, I'm not setting up Patreon yet. We might be able to open up memberships on the YouTube channel as kind of a same kind of idea, but we haven't done that yet. So we'll keep that in mind. And we've got this one asking if the stream will be on the channel to watch later. Yes, I believe by default that it's going to be on under the live tab. I'll try to make sure that shows up on the main page for the channel as well, so it's easy to get to. I think that all that happens automatically. If it doesn't, don't worry. I think we've got a recording of this as well, so I'll be able to piece that together if needed. But yes, we'll make this available for you after the live stream here, especially for anybody who jumped in late. Whoops, sorry, just pop that one again. Sorry about that. Let my producer run things here instead. All right, well, I think that's going to do it for today, guys. I really appreciate you all being here, and I had a blast. So I will look forward to seeing you next time.